Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
So these situations that we're in right now can, in my opinion, they can actually be rectified, right? And it's not a cliche. They can actually be rectified with the Quran and Sunnah. Because it's already been done for more than one people. It's been done for the South Asians, right? When the South Asians were under Dharmic religions, and when the Mughals ruled India for how many centuries, they were a very rich, wealthy kingdom. Yeah. That was done for the East African nations, like Egypt and whatnot. It was done for like so many people had brought their people out of a desolate condition and raised their people up. Spiritually, economically, and socially with Islam, right? So, what is it that is preventing us as Black people from doing this?
Well, I think that that's another really good question. I think that I would go so far as to say, from my study of history, I don't know of any people who have been as deformed in their nature as we have been. Even the Arabs, during the time of our prophet, praise and peace be upon him, they still had, trade was big amongst the Meccans. They had their own history of that. They had their own tradition of poetry. They glorified in language. So they had some sense of self. The history that you recounted, it's a history that was really designed to empty us out of any trace of our humanity. And so I would, as a matter of fact, there's another book that I'm working on, revolving around the notion of Black suffering. Dr. Sherman Jackson wrote a book several years ago, Black Suffering and the Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. I think that's what he called it. And this is really a theological issue taken up by Christians prior to Muslims. Really, most of the Christians borrowed it from Muslims, the Nation of Islam days, but they put it in theological language. And basically, it centers on the question of, if God is a God of justice and mercy, why does he allow bad things to happen? Why does suffering occur in the world? Black suffering, it locates it in our history from slavery to Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera. What Dr. Jackson did, he really dealt with that question from the lens of the Maturidi, the Ash'ari, the Mu'tazili, and the Athari school of theology. So in other words, he just looked at he took the standard schools of Islamic theology and said, would be the opinion of each school of why Black people suffer. I think what he did do, the book is excellent, but I think what he did do, he deviated from the standard African-American position, which was very basic. We looked at scripture and we looked for where, like Yusuf, where people were made to suffer. And we saw whatever God did with them, this is his way, what we call in Islam, the sunnah of Allah. Allah never changes his sunnah. So if God allowed for Yusuf to be put into slavery and then put into prison, also situated him to rise high in that society, that's his sunnah. If Allah permitted the children of Israel generations later to be made slaves, yet be liberated, this is his sunnah. So we should anticipate the same thing. So that's sort of a general framework. I think what's holding us back, though, what you pointed out, I'm trying to make sure I say it in a careful way, but what you pointed out, this is where all people need leaders who are sensitive to what we're talking about, leaders who, and I'm not saying like a sheikh or a scholar, I'm talking about a leader now. Someone who says, wait a minute, this is where we need to go. And they ask Allah for help and for guidance. I think that we're in a lull period. We've had that since the days of slavery, but I think we're in the first time in our history as a people where we don't really have voices and minds who are thinking community progress, collective progress, and thinking about what our struggle is. I think most of our African-American teachers in Islam, they're just students. They're students. They're not leaders per se. They're excellent teachers and they're excellent students, but they're not leaders. Leadership is vision. And you know what I'm saying? It's vision, is spirit, is tenacity, independent of anything else. So I think we are, there's sort of like a build up right now where people are looking for that. That's really what we need. We need more leadership. And again, I repeat, Dr. King wasn't the highest in knowledge, just to use that example, but there was a definite vision that people could draw into to chart the course. I think we have come into Al-Islam and we're making an adjustment right now. We're trying to figure out what this thing is all about because we have so many influences from the Muslim world coming amongst us. We have all of this infighting. And we do have a part of that infighting has caused us to ignore our own history. You know, we ignore the Nation of Islam days as kufr. We ignore the Imam Muhammad days as, you know, not all the way authentic. You know, he didn't have a school. He didn't. I've heard guys say this. You know, he didn't have a school. So we're busy picking ourselves apart as opposed to just really looking at the total context of what has brought us to where we are today. At the same time, there is progress happening, though. You know what I'm saying? So we have to just be patient. One of the things that people tend to not realize is that they're actually in the course of making history. I do believe that we are making history right now. We just don't see it because we're just in the
We're
struggle.
just starting.
Yeah, but I think when people look back, they'll say, "Oh wow, they were doing," and they'll look at us perhaps as some type of heroes, though we were just being regular brothers and regular sisters. You know what I mean?
Now you mentioned something that is very important, and I mentioned this on the channel many times, that just because you studied overseas and you learned Islam, that does not necessitate that you're a leader. You might be a great teacher, you might be great at orator or whatever, or delivering or disseminating some Islamic classes or whatnot, but that doesn't necessitate leadership, right? Leadership is something completely and totally different.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a disconnect with the people who follow in the Black community and the people who lead. There's a wide gap, more than any other community, because we Black folk will tear down our leadership. And this again is an unnatural, unorganic way of thinking, or a way of basically codifying your culture. No other people does this. Nobody intentionally tries to tear down their own leadership. They don't do that. We are the only ones who do that. And this again is something that is a part of our history and a part of our history in terms of interference, because this this quirk in the way that Black folk think is something that J. Edgar Hoover tried to implement and have it going on autopilot with the very famous COINTELPRO, right? And before that, even before J. Edgar Hoover did that, we had meritorious manumission laws, which was essentially promoting scabbing within the Black community, right? Essentially, when you were a slave, you could be freed if you had invented something that benefited white society, or if you had saved your white masters, right? Or if you had snitched on a runaway slave or a slave revolt. If you had snitched on these revolts and caused these rebellions to be quelled, you would be given your freedom. And I said it before, I believe that this meritorious manumission is COINTELPRO is an extension of meritorious manumission, because it basically promotes the selling out and the tearing down of your leadership, tearing down of your own people. And the quicker that we as Black people see what the game is and what is actually going on, right? Because again, these are things that are mentioned both in the Quran and the Sunnah, that if we actually practice, then we would get over this hump in terms of the way that the general public deals with the leadership and how the leadership deals with the general public. You get me? You understand? Right. So there's this wide gap, right? And it's hardwired in our DNA to go against our leadership, but yet we have the tools to quell this, and nobody's addressing it. So if you want to go ahead and address it right now, go ahead.
Well, I think that leadership is not something that we are taught to do. I don't think leadership is something that we can't be trained. We're called to it. And I think that those who feel that they've been called to it, they have to move forward without fear of any criticism, just knowing that that's our condition. So that's probably never going to not be with us. This thing of tearing each other down. That's at least not for a long time. That's probably going to be with us for a long time. What we need now, we just need individual persons who, if you register the need and if you see the issue, you step up to address it. That's the best I can say. I mean, I don't think We have these problems, but the problems don't define us, in my view. I just don't think that they do. I think that where we want to go as a people is much more important than the forces that are before us. But to just give some analysis to your point, that's true. I mean, if you read about the history of the slave rebellions and how they were foiled, it was always another slave.
Yep.
It was never
Meritorious manumission.
yeah. I
That's what
mean,
it
it's
was.
like it's actually crazy. It's like
Yeah.
we're slaves.
Yeah.
We're actually all slaves. Why would you go tell on me? So that
Yeah.
stays with us. Even what's that most recent movie, Judas and the Black Messiah,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guy, he kills himself a day after the
Yeah. His name is
original.
William. What's his name? I can't remember his name. William
Can't
something
remember.
or other. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
after the original thing broadcasted, he because it was eating away at his soul, So this is something that has been put upon us.
And that was COINTELPRO.
That's COINTELPRO. Exactly.
Yep. So if you look at Meritorious Mission, what was it? It was the Meritorious Mission, which incentivized the slaves
Right.
to put down the rebellions. And the
Yeah.
COINTELPRO, what was it? It was the COINTELPRO, which incentivized infiltration and snitching and false information being spread within Black groups to basically discredit and tear them down. And that's why we haven't seen any significant Black leadership since Malcolm and Martin because of this.
Because of
this. And the closest thing in my opinion, that we had is honestly, with all honesty, is Louis Farrakhan. That's the closest thing, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I digress. Go ahead.
No,
Shay.
I mean, I would agree, and I think that the thing with Farrakhan, I think they actually permitted him to do his work, because when you really analyze his work, he's not calling the people to anything.
Paper gold. You see, Black folks are chumps. If America were to tell you to bring all the rocks in this country to her, and she'll give you $1 million for it, you'll do it. And the next day she'll tell you we're using rocks for currencies, chump.